Good morning. I wish you a bright and cheerful morning. We will talk about some topics that maybe are not so good for our mood, but still, let's keep optimistic and be in a good mood. I welcome you to another edition of the series European Contexts, which is a series of talks and seminars and workshops and discussions on current European topics. And I think today, when we are talking about far-right policies, it's unfortunately the right time to talk about this topic, and unfortunately, it's also the right place. I'm also greeting the audience via Zoom and YouTube, and we are here in Vienna, in the heart of Austria, and I might say that we all have experienced here that some red lines were crossed many, many years ago, so we know what we are talking about. The European Context Series is a cooperation between various institutions. Big thank you to Erste Stiftung, who also makes this series possible, to our partners Europe's Future Ideas for Action, a program that is headed by Ivan Vejvoda, who will speak in a very short time, by the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna, IWM, Film Forum for Journalism and Media in Vienna, a training institution, and Press Club Concordia here in Vienna. Big thank you to our speakers and also to Mirjana Tomic, who is at the heart of this series of talks. I think I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Daniela Kraus. I'm the General Secretary of the Press Club. The Press Club has been advocating for free journalism since 1859, and that's also why this topic is so important for us as a press club, because what we are also dealing here with is very serious attacks and threats against journalism. And journalism and democracy, as you know, are inseparably intertwined. So I think, and I really have this question to our speakers, it's also very important to talk about are there red lines crossed in regards to attacks on journalists by right wings, by far-right policies, which we have been experiencing in Austria, unfortunately, too. That's it from my part. I thank you. I think we will have a very, very intensive morning, so I just wanted to tell you that we also record this event via YouTube, so you can re-watch if you want. And now I hand over to Ivan Vejvoda, our dear partner from IWM. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniela. As they say in the US, happy Friday. It's always a true honor to be in this venerable institution, the oldest press club in the world, and we're very happy to partner with everyone. First of all, with Erste Stiftung, our generous donor, without which this event would not be possible. Obviously, Press Club Concordia and Fiume, and Mirjana Tomic, who, as Daniela said, is really at the heart of this initiative. Regretfully, this is a topic that's at the top of the agenda. We will have two great panels, and I'd really like to thank all of those who made the trip to Vienna on this Friday to participate with us. The Institute for Human Sciences, where the Europe's Futures project is based, is dealing with the issues of democracy in Europe, with, unfortunately, the backsliding that we're seeing, but also the enlargement, which is, again, topical. And so this political issue is foremost in the future of Europe. And I think that as I was passing the Hofburg Palace, they're doing some renovations, and there's this huge poster there which says democracy has to be renewed every day. And I think that remains true as ever. So please participate in these discussions. And like Daniela, I'd like to say welcome to our numerous audience, which is in the virtual world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Ivan. I'm Mirjana Tomic, and I curate these seminars. Good morning to everyone in the Press Club and in Zoom. Thank you to our speakers. It's part of them. One is coming now. And I would just like to say why that we chose this topic, and that like most topics we choose, we always try to focus on understanding the local context. because we think that the local context really determines how the voters perceive their realities. At this moment, far right and the rhetoric and what can be done or not can be done seems to be a topic everywhere. Even the front page of The Economist this week carries a leader on the far right, and they argue, and our speakers will say if they agree or not agree, that probably one should engage with the far right. We're facing in Europe two important elections, one in Slovakia this week on the 30th, and the second in Poland. And in both elections, the far right may be part of the government and may imply important changes in Europe and on the national level, not to mention that we also have the elections in the Netherlands. When discussing the far right, many analysts, especially if they don't know the realities of different countries, they have this tendency to say, oh, it is coming everywhere in Europe. I believe it's not the same. And I think that in every country, the situation is quite different, which doesn't mean that one far right is better than the other, but the focus, the policies are quite different. And I think it is very important for both journalists and analysts to understand this local context and how different these local contexts are, which is the reason why we have 7 different countries today. And we have also speakers who come from different professional backgrounds. From evoked Radičová, who was a prime minister of Slovakia and actually fought for democracy in '89, and who will tell us if she's happy what she sees today. Ann-Kathrin Müller, AfD specialist in Der Spiegel. Tuija Seresma from central Finland, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, who will tell us about the issue of race that is coming up in Finland with the new government that includes the far right. And then Burkhard Weidinger, who will tell us about the host country, Austria. He works for a center that, among other things, promotes, and his advisor, the teaching of about education about National Socialism and Holocaust. I would like to say that you all have the program and you can see the full CVs of all our speakers. Said that, I just want to say we have 2 panels. One is a bit longer than the other. And I will ask questions to hear different angles. At the same time, during the coffee break, Ivan will collect a little bit of your experience. How would you fight the far right? What do you think would be the best policies? And Daniela will do the same with our Zoom participants. So at the end, we shall say, what would you do? Because now it is all about the danger is coming, but how would one combat it? And there are so many questions that one has to ask. Should one go into coalition with the far right? Should one consider that? Should one look into the background of people, what they said 15 years ago? Where is that red line? The topic, main topic is, where is this red line? Is there anything that can no longer be said, or everything is free today to be said? Are we going to be shooting each other? At what moment should people go into the streets and say, we have to defend a democracy, enough is enough? At what moment should governments react and say, we cannot go further? We do all say, generally speaking, well, it's about feminism, it's about Russia, it's about Ukraine, it's about migration. So there are different topics for different countries. But is there this red line, or it is just movable and as the great theoretician of the far right, Kasmude, said, we have mainstreaming of the center, and then probably, we have mainstreaming of the far right rhetoric for center parties, and the other way around, the far right parties are trying to wash their face. So with that, I will sit down and we shall start with Iveta. Iveta, I would just like to recall one thing. Iveta was prime minister. She's also a sociologist. She's now the dean of the Faculty of Mass Media at Pan-European University in Bratislava. And I would just like to recall one moment about 12 years ago. There was a big press freedom conference in Bratislava. You were prime minister, and it was the first time ever that I, as a journalist, stood up with everyone else to applaud your speech. It was about press freedom. However, time has passed. Mm-hmm. What did people like yourself did wrong? What is it that you did not understand at the time? And please tell us, is there a limit to what, is there this red line in Slovakia? Which is the red line? I understand that the candidate who may win the most votes, Robert Fico, he's even talking to people, bloggers who are on international lists, who are spreading hate. Please give us what went wrong, what didn't you understand as a politician or as a sociologist? Where are we now? Where, what can be done, if anything?
If I know the answer, we are not facing this problem. All of us, I think. So first of all, thank you very much for organizing such a discussion. Thank you very much to have a chance to be a part, really. Hopefully, in the discussion, we are maybe nearer to find the answers and to define if and what kind of red line there is. I would start with, I would like to say 3 major hypotheses, if you do not mind, not thesis, hypotheses. Democracy has to have 2 main legs. One is human rights and legal state, and second is effectiveness, socio-economic situation. Both legs are at the same importance. I absolutely agree that we have something common concerning far right, but really very specific situations because of the differences into these 2 legs or pillars of democracy. First, socio-economic, variation only in the countries of EU. From 277% of GDP per capita or purchase power, standard purchase power, to the average of EU, to 50% in Bulgaria, to 63% in Slovakia. So really very big differences concerning quality of life. Look at the human dignity, look at the human development index, look on prosperity index and many others, and you will see really not variation, but really very huge and deep differences. And after many years, at least 30 and more, these differences are not lower, but bigger. So first, real problem. To this situation, surely correspondent the level of human rights and legal state. And the quality or type of political scene. We have totally different political representations in our countries. Only few of them are compatible. Argument, footnote, look at the clubs at the level of European Parliament. This doesn't correspond to the coalitions at each country. It's totally different. That's why also the agreement at the level of European institutions, it's not obvious and it's more than complicated. Different political scene once more, very important argument was the reason, one of the major reasons of the split of Czechoslovakia. Different program, different aims, totally different position to transition after 1989. Personally, we usually used to illustrate it through the fight in between Klaus and Mečiar. But totally different approach. From the beginning, with the end of splitting Czechoslovakia in peaceful way, in comparison to former Yugoslavia when there was 10 years war. So first, still deep socio-economic differences, which are deeper and deeper, with the consequence of totally different quality of life in the countries. Second, different statute and position and effectiveness of legal state through measurements like level of corruption, look at my country, unprecedented imprisoning of the head of special prosecutor with the highest position of the legal state. So 40 of them are already in jail, and more than 100 people at the highest positions are under the investigation. So really we have to speak about still very weak legal state, with the consequence for people that they do not just that we really have the system with equal position behind the law or for the law, or that they are really equal citizens in the country. Still there is understanding that as it was before 1981, there is a group of privileged and the others, Third thing we have to stress, legal state as such. Why we have a problem with far rights? We have constitutional law, where it's precisely defined what is democratic and what not. What is discrimination and what not. So why we are facing something which is really dangerous to system as a whole? In Slovakia, there was a case during my government when we have cancelled real fascist party according to the constitutional law. They came back in moderate rhetoric. Yes? So we have them, but in moderate rhetoric. But this is one way how to work and what to do. If we have it in constitutional law, we mean it seriously. We have adequate instruments really to be able to distinguish those who are against the major principles of human rights. Because this is the question. All the time, the argument from other side is we have a freedom of speech. And I think it's time to talk if there are or not the limits for freedom of speech. This is crucial. And more, it's not only on the level of each state. I have read precisely prepared regulation for journalism at the level of EU. Please have a look on the Article 17. Please have a look. We have started with very diplomatic protest at the level of Club de Madrid, and really ask deputies at the European Parliament to stop this article. In this article is that any online platform without any valuation has to be registered. Where we are.
Iveta,
So,
may I just interrupt
yeah.
you 1 second to go back, just please, very briefly. What is, at this very moment, before the elections, what is it that made, you gave the framework, what is it that makes the discourse of the far right in Slovakia so attractive? What is it that people like about it? But please, briefly.
Complex of uncertainties they are living now, dissatisfaction with their quality of life, and from the far right, the offer of some kind of security. And it works. It's enough for the people. The minimum duty of democracy is to guarantee security for the inhabitants. They feel insecure. And if there is a party or movement offering security through anti-globalization movement, anti-system movement, people trust them and they are open to this extremist
Thank you so
offer.
much. Anne-Catherine, now I shall come to you. Anne-Catherine is a journalist for Müller, is a journalist with Spiegel, German magazine, and she has been following the far-right AfD party for the past 4 years. She says that the party is no longer hiding. It is out there in the open to say, here we are, and this is what we offer. What do they offer? We spoke last night, and Anne-Catherine said things are getting worse and worse, more and more radical, and no one is even ashamed to say that they subscribe to the AfD principles. What does AfD offer right now? The number of the potential voters is increasing, according to the polls, and I shall quote what Politico said in an article. We should not be so scared if there is far right in Finland, but we should be if there is in Germany. And it is growing. Please, is there a red line or all red lines have been crossed?
Okay, so first of all, I'd say that we should be afraid of far right everywhere, not just in Germany, also in Finland. And yes, it is true, the numbers in the polls and also in the way of thinking of right-wing extremism is growing in Germany, which is not good at all. And the AfD is offering very simple answers who are often around the subject of migration. So no matter what kind of subject, they always go back to migration. So if they say, we don't want wind energy or whatever, and then they say we need to go back to whatever else they think is better, then at some point in the argument, they will come back to migration. It somehow works, which is quite interesting, but right now I think the Germans are very tired, as probably all of the Europeans are, of all the crises. I mean, COVID, the war, then the energy prices rising, the inflation going up. So they are using this kind of insecurity to gain more voters, but also they are especially strong in the areas where we had right-wing extremist parties before. So where the NPD was strong, they are even stronger. So in the past couple of years, they started off being a bit more moderate, and now they are showing their real faces, I would say. I'm not saying they are moving more to the right, because I've been there for quite some years, and they're showing their true faces, and they're proud of it. That's what you just mentioned. So they go up on stage and say, we are the most interesting right-wing party in Germany. Actually, they call themselves conservative party in Europe, because we are showing openly that we are radical and we are not afraid to show it. We're not like Meloni, who is now suddenly pretending to be less radical or whatever. We are here, we're strong, and we are even gaining numbers. So that is what they do. And because now they are being proud to be like that, and then polls are rising, other people are now saying, yes, I vote for them as well, or I will join the party. So that is actually giving them a couple more points right now. We'll see if that continues.
Do they have is there a red line in Germany? Is anti-Semitism the red line, or?
It has been for years.
And?
It's kind of stopping to be a red line, at least for some parts of the voters. Obviously, there's still the majority who is not voting for that, who doesn't like that, who is, we had a case just now where from another party, the Freie Wähler, the second prime minister in Bavaria, it was found out that 35 years ago, he wrote a pamphlet that was very anti-Semitic, and he didn't come out and say, yes, I did this, I'm sorry, and I will, I've come a long way, I'm not thinking like this anymore.
May I just be very concrete? He was talking about sending people to Auschwitz.
Yes.
So it's not a little bit anti-Semitic,
No,
it is sending people to Auschwitz.
Said, yeah. He was around, I think, 17 at the time when that came out, and he said, no, I didn't write it. Yes, I had it in my backpack at school, and yes, I got like a disciplinary thing from school. So obviously the school was sure that he had something to do with it. But he didn't come out and say, I'm sorry, and this is what happened. He said, oh, the media is bad, and it was so long ago, and the teachers shouldn't even know about this anymore because it was 35 years ago. So he kind of changed the narrative, which is what the AfD always does. So he kind of learned from their way of, dealing with scandals, and he adopted them, and he's still second prime minister in Bavaria. So that was another example of how stuff is changing and how even the conservative middle, whatever that is moving more to the right.
Is AfD democratic?
No.
Should we be scared for Germany and for Europe?
Yes, I mean, it is very important to realize that something is shifting, and that it is very important that the CDU, which is our conservative party, is, we have this saying in Germany about like a firewall to the extreme right, and that they keep it up. I'm saying they're not keeping it up right now. I'm not even sure it's really there anymore. So they need to rebuild this and not do any form of cooperation or coalition building next year after the election in 3 counties. So that is kind of where we're at now, and I think a lot's at stake right now.
Thank you. We'll come to Tuija Saresma is a professor at the university. Her specialty is, sorry, I'm not saying the name because I forgot to ask you how to pronounce it. Her specialty is gender, hate, and she has been very active in Finnish media after the creation of the coalition government in Finland that includes the far right. For us who do not live in Finland and still have this stereotypical image of a country with excellent media, excellent media literacy, the best education, it is a bit difficult to understand when you read what the current Minister of Finance and the leader of the True Finns party wrote 10, 12 years ago. If I had a gun, I would be shooting now. I would be spitting at beggars. I cannot take Islam. And it is the language that we certainly do not expect or do not imagine that can happen in a country with the best education system in the world, according to OECD. So what is the red line in Finland? I would also like to say that we spoke about it, and I find it interesting and probably similar to Austria, that the media in Finland did not support this far-right party, but they have transmitted their messages through blogs. So blogs were the real way of transmitting the message. Could you please give us a little bit of the background? How come all of a sudden there is this racism that is springing up in Finland that we simply did not expect? And is there a red line?
Yeah. So the university that I come from is the University of Jyväskylä, which is in central Finland. Yeah. And I'm an academic, so I'd like to start with like the concept of far right and whether we can use that about the Finns party, the true Finns, as they used to call themselves. And I'm not sure that's something that we haven't been discussing really in Finland, or we have said that, no, it's not a far right party. It might be a right-wing populist party or even a radical right party, but not far right party. And we take distance from far right mobilization elsewhere because we in Finland, as a Nordic welfare state, we don't have that kind of problems. We don't have racism. We are gender equality. We have high gender equality. We are the happiest people in the world, and we don't have these problems. So it has come as a surprise to many that there has always been racism, and we are a colonial state. We have used the Sami people's resources and drove them to the north, and we have this colonial history as well. And we have a racist history, but we haven't been talking about that. And you asked how it's possible to sort of speak things like that, like the finance minister has been writing. And also, like recently, she has been talking about these black sacs that the Muslim women are. So she's dehumanizing Muslim women really, in a really bad way. And talking about, and I'm sorry, Turkish monkey people. So she's really racist still, and she hasn't apologized for what she's been saying. But how this was possible? It started in the blogs. In the blog of Jussi Halla-aho, who is the former chair of the Finns party, but he started as a blogger. So he wrote blogs. And then the blog became really, really popular. And there was this sort of guest book of the blog where this Riikka, who apparently is Riikka Purra, the current finance minister, also wrote these really, really racist slurs and fantasized about killing the others, the young immigrant boys in the commuter train, for example. So this was the place where this kind of rhetoric was, it was allowed, it was even encouraged, and Riikka, also Riikka Purra, has made her way to politics through that Scripta blog, as did Jussi Halla-aho, who started with the blog and then became a member of parliament and then member of the EU parliament and now is running for presidency and is the speaker of the Finnish parliament. So if you let people write anything in the blogs, very racist stuff, very violent stuff, you get they get really popular and they spread their message through blogs, which nobody's censoring, so they can say whatever they want. And then when they go to elections, they already have people to support them, to vote for them. So that is how it was possible. And I think like now we have TikTok, we have Instagram that are not moderated that much, particularly not TikTok. So that is the way the Finns party has gained its recent popularity in the last elections. So I would say that social media is a really, really central part of the rise of the far right. And why is that? Because it allows hate speech and targeting like ethnic minorities and LGBT minorities, and it allows there to be hate speech. And this is why we should be very, just as you said, we should be really carefully about, I'm a big fan, of course, of freedom of speech and freedom of press. But when these far-right people are starting to talk about freedom of speech in the sense that, yes, we should allow all hate speech, or there is no hate speech, you should be able to say anything to anybody and whatever, then we need to really worry about what's happening, because we need to find ways to sort of not let people write racist.
Just to interrupt you. It is amazing and interesting what you're saying, considering that Finland is among the countries in the world with the highest rate of credibility in the mainstream media.
Yeah, but it's eroding, I think. We have, and our media is wonderful, and this summer it has started doing their job really. They have finally started to question the True Finns message, because they have not really challenged them before. We researchers have been saying that there is this racist discourse, but the journalists have not really started writing about that, and perhaps that's because they know that whenever they write something critical about the Finns party, there is a huge, sorry for saying this, shitstorm that is happening online, and we researchers get that as well. And it, of course, may silence us from speaking the truth. But yeah, I'm happy that the media has finally started to challenge and ask about their racism. And I still, because I'm an optimist always, I still hope that we can trust the media from now on also. And there is polarization between like the quality media and then the sort of the other kind of media that calls themselves media, which is they are not obeying any journalistic rules or anything like that. But there is a polarization, and some people choose to read only that or only watch TikTok videos. But the majority in Finland still reads quality media and watches the 9:30 news. So then we sort of get the right image of what's happening.
Can you tell me just really briefly, what do they offer? What does the far right or the Finns party, what do they offer to the voters that make them attractive?
They say we are going to put the petrol price down. They say that we Finns don't have to care about the climate change. We didn't do that, we don't have to care. They say that this is our country, we don't need anybody else here, and all the money that we get belongs to us, and we don't have to share it with anybody. So basically, these really easy populist points that, that is easy to believe, as you both said, yeah.
But there is a very big contrast between what Iveta said, you know, a country that is still struggling to make it to the level, economic level of Europe. And here we are talking about one of the richest countries of Europe. So that is, and it's happening in both places. Maybe the format is different, but it's still quite dangerous. Now we come to the host country, Austria. Berta Weidiger is a senior researcher at the Documentation Center of Austrian Resistance in Vienna, academic advisor of the Austrian Journal of Historical Studies, and of Austria's federal program for teaching and learning about National Socialism and the Holocaust. I have to say, although, as Daniela said, Austria, maybe with Italy together, is the avant-garde of having the far right in the government in 2000. I would like, among other things, to comment whether the far right in 2000 and the one today that is, according to the polls, going to get 30% of the elections this year, is it the same? Is there any sort of a red line? But I was really shocked by the film that the far right youth produced. And not only was the far-right rhetoric in the film, they were standing in front of the balcony where Hitler declared Anschluss, talking about the future. They were attacking journalists directly, and they were carrying torches, and it was truly fascist. Please, the word is yours.
Well, I think if we look at the Austrian example, one thing we have to see is that in Austria, there has never been a cordon sanitaire or firewall in place, okay? Never since the post-war period, not at any point. The two parties of the center have always viewed the far-right party as, at the very least, a token they could use in power gambles with the other centrist party. While the Social Democrats adopted a no coalition policy in 1986, they did indeed form coalitions at the state level in Carinthia in 2004 and in Burgenland in 2015. And in turn, the Conservative People's Party has formed a number of coalitions at the state level as well, and twice at the federal level since the turn of the millennium, most recently in 2017. So in Austria, basically there are two contexts in which red lines are being brought up. One is things that are considered unacceptable in a potential coalition partner, and the other would be things that the far-right party itself considers unacceptable within its own ranks. And in both regards, I think it is fair to say that the lines, the red lines, are drawn rather generously. And today, they basically coincide with the lines established by the law. So there are no more moral or political boundaries being drawn within the realm of legality. So anything that is legal is considered legitimate, or to put it the other way around, anything that's not illegal goes, right? And so if we ask ourselves what this, what the non-existence of a firewall in Austria has led to, I would say it has clearly led to a widespread normalization of far-right talking points, rhetoric, narratives. And of course, there have always been people advocating for appeasing, or to put it in a more neutral term, integrating the far-right, and they've basically been arguing that bringing the far-right into power would lead to their demystification, like the practical constraints of government responsibility would put pressure on this party to become, to evolve and to become more moderate and more reasonable, less extreme, right? And so if we ask ourselves if this did in any way pan out, I think we can assess that it is, the Austrian case shows that it is true that the government participation may increase tension within the party. It may also increase disappointment amongst the voters. But as far as demystification or decreasing their appeal, it has clearly not proven sustainable. So while both the two most recent stints of the Freedom Party in government have both ended in collapse, in both cases, they regained the strength rather quickly.
How do you explain that?
Well, I would say that while this government participation did not, well, they did make the party appear more moderate temporarily, and also weakened the party temporarily. But in the long run, I think what it did through this normalization that I've referred to was not have the party move more to the center, but have the center move more to the right, okay? And so this rhetoric, also the topics, like the salience of certain issues, migration, has been increasing ever since the Freedom Party gained this sort of strength for the first time, right? And so, yeah, I would say the Austrian model clearly did not work out. Many things have been tried, you know, like integrating the far right, integrating the topics of the far right while excluding the party itself. As far as the media are concerned, I think in Austria, what has been going down is sort of over coverage of the far right, over demonization of its leaders, which made these leaders appear larger than life, and I think contributed to their success. So if nothing else, maybe Austria can serve as a sort of worst practice model for others. for how not to face the challenge of the far right.
Thank you. Ann-Kathrin, do you think that the media is over-covering the far right in Germany?
Well, it's not that I don't have a lot of work, but I don't think we do it too much in the sense, it depends. So a couple of weeks ago, the first mayor was voted for the AfD, like who does this as a full-time job. And suddenly, I mean, it was sure that that was going to happen, at least for people who, follow what the AfD is doing and how the polls are in the regions and everything. So, but still, when it happened, every media was like, ooh, first mayor for the AfD. Of course, it's an historic thing that for the first time they get that kind of job. So it should be, an article, and it can even be a push article, I don't know the English word. But then after that, like for a whole week, like every media did like 8 to 10 articles about what that means, what it means for the economy, blah, 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 blah. So there was so much going on that, every day they had like this huge headlines everywhere. So that, of course, helps them in the sense that they now feel more important because they achieved something. So I would say we need to be a little bit cooler in the sense of, like analyze it more or better in, before stuff happens, and then react to it, accordingly to what it means, and even have like more context around it. So when we look at where the mayor and another official that was voted a couple of weeks before him were voted in, you could see that these were the communities where the Conservative Party had been arguing for years against the firewall, saying we need to work with them, with the AfD. There's not a lot of areas where the CDU does that, but where they did it, the AfD got their first people in positions. So, and that kind of information was missing for the first couple of days, and then only integrated into articles later on. And I think we need to be better at analyzing that beforehand or right at the moment, and get the context with the articles right away. And then it's okay to report on it.
German public TV has a lot of talk shows. Should the far right always be present?
There's a huge debate about that because the public channels have like a law that tells them what to do. And they interpret it as having to invite them because they're in the Bundestag and because they have elected officials. And I think to some extent before elections, that is correct. But in periods where, they have no power at all to influence policies, I don't think democracy and public channels that are financed by democratic institutions should give them some kind of stage. So it's not the question of should they never go there, but how often and what kind of subjects should they be able to talk about. So should we always invite them when it's about aggression, or should we challenge them when it's about different subjects, normal policy subjects? And I think different talk shows are handling it differently. And I think also when you do it, you have to do it very well prepared. So it's a matter of how.
Thank you. Iveta, you have been, not as a candidate, very active in promoting democracy or trying to save democracy now before the elections in Slovakia. Three questions, but short, the time runs fast. A, how many times until now have you had have you said, I can't believe they're saying this, I thought it could not be possible? I don't think we could go that far. B, you try to promise that democracy, this is what we were talking before, is still possible. What is your main argument? And 3, should one go into coalition with certain far right? But please briefly.
First question each day. Because I am asking myself what we have done wrong. The mistakes. One student on one discussion has given me the question, after the murder of journalist Mr. Kuciak and his partner, what you have done that this can happen? And this question I have always in my mind, each day. trying to answer, but not only theoretically, and this is second question, but to democracy is about, as I remember it from theory, also civic participation. We have to be active. So I try to be active as I can. So whole period of 33 years, yes, I was several years in the highest position and responsible in politics, many years, but before and after, I am really still active and traveling around Slovakia, doing discussions, meetings, arguing, listening to the people, how they understand situation. And my major answer for today's situation, hopefully I am not wrong, is that we are facing three trends: global anti-globalism, international nationalism, and populism. And if you put these three trends together, then we didn't give our citizens adequate argument, answer, offer for their identity. They are lost. They are lost. In other words, extremists are only such strong as we Democrats are weak. If we have given them free space for major issue and its identity and security. Sorry, we cannot offer them multiculturalism because they have fear. We cannot offer them a migration issue because they have fear. We cannot offer them the crisis of living cost because they have fear. And what we offer them to fight with the fear? We Democrats. Plurality, come on, it's insecurity. Flexibility, it's insecurity. Flexibility at the labor market, it's once more insecurity. Whole life learning, come on, never-ending story, so I'm never ready to do my job, it's insecurity. What kind of security we Democrats can offer them to compete with far-right offer? At the end of the day, the mainstream political parties try to keep their topics as a part of their own political issues. These have happened in Finland, these have happened in each country. So former mainstream political parties are nearer to the extreme. And they try to keep the voters from far right or far left. We didn't talk about far left. In former Central Eastern countries, far left have the same strong position as far right. And last but not least, four major values of European Union, yes? Freedom of movement, freedom of capital, services, exchange of goods. Really? Really, we fulfilled this aim? We fulfilled what we have promised, we will establish. I think that no, that the mark is not good. So we have to recover democratic principles for the situation of 21st century. Comment, people are trying to find identity, and they are much easier and closer to them through social network bubbles. They are closed for identity in virtual world and not at all in the real world. And if they do the step to the real world, they are lost, not only through through their ability to find themselves, but also to be proud on something. Can they be proud of permanent crisis? I'm not so sure. One small footnote, brief. 33 years from my beautiful country in the heart of Europe, I love. And that's why I try to be active all the time. This is energy I have inside, my energy. 4 deep recessions. We offer them new system and they are facing 4 deep recessions. Beginning of 90s, terrible recession. End of 90s, near the default, total default of the country. Both these recessions were internal because of us, and 2 external, because of external factors, recessions, financial crisis, 99, 1912, and now double crisis. Imagine thinking of, also of me, in 2009, member of Eurozone, Euro. In the morning, Euro crisis. No minute of positive effect of this step. So it's absolutely understandable what's going on. Absolutely. Who will applaud to such a step? That's why I'm not surprised that our societies, as Noam has written in his excellent analysis, people are open to a new kind of politicians based on 3 P, on polarization of society, populism, and post-truth. That's it. And they are using all these 3 instruments. And such societies like Germany, East and West, there is strong and deep division all the time, all the time. It's visible in everyday life. I spent 1 year in Germany, and it not only through hard data picture, but also if you travel around, it's still visible. If you then put this on the table, this new kind of politicians, what they can offer, they are offering the topics that are working in the mind of the people, and they are working with the fear.
Thank you.
That's it.
I want to have some time for questions, but
sorry,
please,
but
Anne-Catherine.
I only wanted to explain that
Yes, of course.
the polarization, for example, in Slovakia, we are facing since 1989, 1-to-1, 40% for former regime, also today. Communism was better, 40%. 40%, okay, this regime with some problems, but okay, this regime. And freedom, it was more freedom in former regime than today. People do not feel free.
Thank you so much. Anne-Catherine, please.
Yeah, can I just add to that? Because, of course, with Eastern Germany and Western Germany, we still have, kind of very different narratives in some policy areas, especially towards Russia and towards the Ukraine war. You can see that it kind of goes into all kinds of areas of life. And I think what we are still forgetting is how apparently now the despots of Europe and the world are, being very successful in influencing our policies via, bringing migrants to different countries at certain times to influence in our policies to have more pressure in the country. And also, I think what we're forgetting is disinformation, how successful that is being used, via social media and also via official channels, lobbying, all this kind of stuff. Russian state media, being shown everywhere through the internet and all this kind of stuff. And also, because we haven't mentioned it, COVID, I think, has, at least in Germany, had a big effect, because this whole rhetoric of the far right, of the state is, against you and it's telling you how to live, suddenly was, at least for some time, if you had hard COVID measures, true for some part of it. I mean, why don't politicians in Germany, go to the stages and say, I know we've got some parts of it wrong. Maybe we shouldn't have closed off the kindergartens for that long a time. But really good scientific experts told us you can choose between closing kindergartens or having people die. So if you were in my position, would you have really chosen another way? There's no, discourse about how we chose to do COVID measures, and now that's what they win from, because suddenly the whole talking about, in Germany it's Dieter Oben, they above us are against us down here, was kind of right in the way that, people actually politicians told you cannot go to see your friends, at least during this winter, or you cannot go to a supermarket without a mask on. So in some point, it was a very hard time in politics, and I would always, have an understanding for, if a politician had to choose between these two things, that they chose to not let people die. But because Germany had, at least for sometimes, pretty hard measures, that whole rhetoric is very successful, and that kind of plays into the whole, I think, plays into why they're successful right now.
Well, Austria had those measures too. We lived through that as well. Just to the same question to both of you, and then I would like to ask the audience to ask questions online and offline, of course. What Iveta mentioned, identity and security. And also, do you think it is one of the main reasons why voters will vote FPÖ? Or you also think that some of the mainstream parties here, both the center right and the Social Democrats, failed to address some issues that really matter to people?
Well, I think it's certainly true that there are some very basic needs that everybody has, needs that are not per se far right or anything. Like of course, you want to feel safe. You want to feel like you belong. You want to feel like your opinion matters, like you can influence what's going on around you. You want to understand what's going on around you. And of course, what the far right does is offer answers that cater to these needs. But the problem, of course, is that these answers are based on, exclusion and division. And so the political competition of the far right is, of course, called upon to offer alternative answers based on other values, based on values like equality, solidarity, and so on. And that's why I think it's, of course, true that like the weakness of the political competitors of the far right very strongly contributes to far right success. And the failure to address these needs that I mentioned. So yeah, I think that's basically universal truth, and of course it's true for Austria as well.
Do you think the FPÖ is democratic?
I think the FPÖ, I have to give you a diplomatic answer on that. I think the FPÖ is a party that operates within the boundaries established by Austrian law. But I also think...
Unless they try to penetrate the institutions.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to distinguish, I mean, in my opinion, large parts of what I would consider the far right today has basically made its peace with democratic procedures, with democratic institutions. They partake in elections. They don't want to abolish parliaments. They accept the rule of law. They don't. They don't use or explicitly condone the use of physical violence, right? But does that make them democratic? I think there's more to being democratic, and that is support and actively promote democratic values. And in that perspective, a party that is rather explicitly anti-egalitarian, a party that systematically ostracizes minorities, a party that, still embraces the idea of the German Volksgemeinschaft in its platform, right? I think if this party would have to be described as democratic is very much up for debate.
Thank you very much. And to you, Tuija. And then we shall extend a bit, 5 minutes or so, because we started a tiny bit late. Tuija, do you think that identity, security should not be an issue in Finland? It's rich.
It is very much an issue.
That's why they are a member state of NATO.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the physical security? I was thinking of personal security, economically speaking.
That too, because they try to, the far
and
right.
Identity, yes. Please.
Yeah, security and identity, but security, because there's always this discourse that the foreign perpetrators are like attacking our women and all that. So there is really strong migrants. Yes. So that is what they try to tell us, and so there is fear, and sort of mobilizing affect and emotions is a really central part of their logic and their logic of action, and that also comes to identity. And I would say that identity is a real important issue here, and I would even go so far as to say that the Finns party has been bringing the American cultural wars to Finland as well. It doesn't suit there very well, but they are trying to do that. They start talking about the woke. I don't know if you know the woke. So they talk about the woke people, and they talk about the green values and environmental values, and how trans rights and LGBT plus rights are threatening the heterosexual marriage, and our like core values, our Christian values. And that is weird because Finland is a rather profane country. I mean, we are not very religious. So, and we are like liberal, and there is like gender equal marriage has been there for a long time, but they are now trying to turn it into a cultural war, and they are trying to accelerate polarization with all these strange accusations that are not true, and hence post-truth politics is really, and polarization. So I agree very much with what you say, populist sentences and post-truth claims and trying to polarize us is in the key, and that comes to our identities as well. And yes, like the speech about the white hetero male who cannot say anything anymore, so his freedom of speech is threatened, and that is not true at all. But that's what they say, and somehow it resonates with people, and they start believing in that, and they say that yes, I feel this is true. This must be true because I feel it, and in my like family, I know that there is unemployment of these white male people because they haven't had education, because it's all women that go to universities and people from other countries that take their places at the universities and take their places in the working life.
Just give us the figure. How many migrants does Finland have? What's the percentage?
Less than 10%. I wouldn't even, but it's really a minor thing. So, and the funny thing is that those people who vote for the Finns party are not actually coming from that much from the the areas where there are some migrants, but from the areas that there are no migrants at all. So they just don't know about them, so they are afraid. So fear is a key element.
Thank you. Fear is the word that has been repeated many times today. So may I ask the audience to ask questions, and also Daniela, tell me, yes, please introduce yourself.
I have a question to the
Please
plenum.
introduce yourself.
My name is Wheatley. I am a journalist and one of the oldest members of Press Club Concordia. My question goes to the plenum and especially to Press Club Concordia. Is there a plan, a chance that you will discuss in the near future the far left rhetoric, and where are the borders, the red lines or the yellow lines?
I will reply to this question. We are free to decide our topics, and we are considering also doing events on the left. Thank you. Please go ahead, and then in the back, Javier, introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Turkish News Agency Anadolu. I have two questions. First of all, and the example of Slovakia and Austria, if I say right, the fiscal, is it true? FICO or fiscal? FICO, yeah. And also FPÖ, the both political personality or parties, they were involved or linked the affairs or corruptions or something like that. But even that, the people support these parties and these political persons. What's the reason of that? What do you think about this? And all the issues that we're focusing here is not connected with the global development, especially after 9/11. If you said what we did wrong, if we look at the destroying the Iraq or Syria or Yemen's or Afghanistan, what did Europe?
Well, the thing is, this is only about the far right in Europe. We have to focus.
I think it is connected each other because we are focusing on the identity and security. What is the reason of the identity and security?
Thank you. I shall collect one more, Javier, and you with fringes, and then, oh, I didn't see, you asked, three, and then Javier, go ahead. Oh, sorry. And please introduce yourself.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Javier Luque from the International Press Institute. First of all, I want to congratulate both Press Club Concordia and FIUM for organizing such a timely conference with these two interesting panels. One of the, well, my question may seem very, very simple, but I'm sure that you know, sometimes simple questions are the most complicated. We've been talking about, or I've heard that, like, in each one of the countries, the boundaries that have been crossed or pushed. The title of this conference is there a red line? So my question to each one of the representatives, if you want, is, from your perspective, which one is the next boundary or ethical, boundary that will be or is in peril to be crossed in each one of the contexts? Thank you.
Thank you. And the third, and then we shall.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth. I'm a journalist in training, Elizabeth Bauer, and a freelancer. And my question goes to actually all of you, but what really touched me was when Ms. Müller said, when far-right party members get invited to panel discussions, it's a question of when and how and in which context, and that we should give them different opportunities to talk about different things so they cannot spin it around migration all the time. And also, Mr. Weidinger was mentioning demonization of far-right party members in Austria. And I think a key point here is to talk about emotions and effective emotions in journalism, because it's the same token as far-right politics are using. So my question goes, it's hard to say, but is there a guideline how journalists should deal with far-right parties? Because I think it's a very important question.
Thank you very much. Well, let's start with...
Thank you very much. I try briefly. First question, how it is possible that such corrupted political party and politician is back after the murder of the journalists when the streets were full of protests. Two reasons. First, doubts. Doubts. If the investigation is correct, if it's not only fight against a political opposition, if, step by step. He didn't say it's wrong. He said, think about it, doubt about this, if the really whole procedures are correct. And if it's not only the fight against political opposition, and it has working. And second thing, statement, all politicians are corrupted, point. Some of them less, some of them more, but all. So now you can choose if you wish to have order, social security, and me back, maybe a bit corrupted, but the others are also corrupted, but has created chaos, no real solutions. You are lost, you have a fear, so what do you prefer? This is the answer. What we have done wrong? Several things. First of all, you have to show that democracy has a sense in your everyday life, each day. Not only in talking, or we have values of solidarity. Okay, with whom? What is really right and wrong? To be solidar. With whom? And how? Value of equality of chances, I do not see them. It's obvious, and also my colleagues and myself, as sociologists, we have measurements that the way to do the lift, the mobility, to increase your social status is not based on better and higher education. And people do not believe that this is working. And this position in EU has more than 60% of people. Doesn't matter if the country is wealthy or not. People lost the belief that they themselves can increase their position and have a better social position.
And how do you think the media should deal with it?
Yeah, I only tried to explain that what we have done wrong. We didn't fulfill our promises. In all four major values of EU, justice, freedom, equality of chances, solidarity. Point. We didn't fulfill. Concerning how to behave in media, I was thinking several times, discussing, and my position is that if the political party is legal, if it's legal, and media, public media, they cannot stop them out of the door. That's reality. But how they can then organize all the performance, it's another issue. How they open the Overton window, what is normal? What kind of topics are really part of standard discussion. I cannot imagine that vulgar, impolite, uneducated speeches full of hates have a space in our public media. What we have done. And this is going on. There are fighting, quarreling, who is less educated, who is more impolite, who will say what kind of total, really vulgar sentences and words I cannot repeat. And these people, you are sitting and watching, listening. Whew, this is normal, okay. You create then this kind of political non-culture, create the atmosphere in the society.
Thank you.
So, yeah, but this is to stop them immediately. How they talk, about what they talk. This is the right of media.
Ann-Katrin?
Yeah, I think I'll go to the guideline question because of time. No, there's no guideline in the sense that, I mean, there's no media sphere, I think, in any of these countries where journalists have the same opinion about the far right and have the same, you know, I mean, I guess there's some kind of mainstream journalists, if to use that word for once, who have like a democratic principles and who don't want to see them in power and who, you know, want to do right by them, but even under them, there's a discussion, should we talk to them more now because the polls are up, or should we talk less, or whatever, you know? So there's lots of different opinions, and I mean, I would be happy if there was some kind of guidelines in the sense that we look at what the science has taught us, you know, about normalization processes, about how to deal with people who just lie to you all the time and who don't, you know, who are not even ashamed about it. I think there's one other thing that also happens in journalism, but in lots of areas of politics, that people don't believe that they would actually do what they're talking about. I think it happened the same with Donald Trump. Everybody was like, oh, once he's in power, it's not going to be that bad. You know, there's going to be lots of institutions around him, lots of people who will tell him how to speak better or whatever, less aggressive, less weird, whatever. And he didn't, because that's what he does, that's what he wants, and he had the power. So it will be the same with the AfD. People are always like, oh, but, you know, Björn Höcke is just the most extreme, the rest is, you know, less dangerous or whatever. No, it's, you know, he has the power in the party with other people as well. And they will, if they can, do what they say they will do. So I don't know where that's from, if it's naivete or if it's wishful thinking or if it's, you know, hopefulness. I mean, I try to be hopeful as well and to not be, you know, panic. But there's this weird thing that we always think it's not going to be as bad. And I think we should stop doing that and then
I think this is
accordingly.
a very important
Only
topic.
if I can, please do not forget, we are still talking about some kind of extreme, okay, 30% of people in average are involved, but I would like kindly ask you to think about mainstream political parties. Look at Hungary, the politics of Viktor Orban, or look at Poland. Who knows what will happen in Slovakia? I have a feeling we will start to be the part of this region with the same kind of politics. It looks so. So mainstream is changed. Yeah. And this is for me the problem. This is for me the problem.
So many problems are coming up. We'll have more events. Tuija, please.
Yes, I would also ask the question, like, on the other way, like, how are journalists supposed to work with these politicians who do not, in the case of Finland, who are not, they do not want to be interviewed, they are not allowing, they don't have press conferences anymore, they have been learning to communicate via Twitter, the X, and with their blogs, so they don't even like be interviewed. So that is a big problem I think. It's really hard for journalists to do their work if they don't communicate with you. But I would also like to answer the other question about the next red line, because I think that's really a good question, an important question. And I would like to remind you that the Finnish government has only been in office for 3 months, pretty much 3 months. And there has already been like the first time in Finnish history that there is a far-right party in the government. And there has been repeated slurs used at the general meeting. The N-word was repeated constantly.
You mean N-word?
N-word, you know what the N-word is. I don't want to repeat that, but that was repeated
For the black population.
Yes, yes, in the historical context. But anyway, it was not interrupted. And we have ministers who believe in or who use the conspiracy theories of the Great Replacement, which is the really far-right conspiracy theory. So I don't even dare to imagine what would be the next red line. We have crossed so many red lines in 3 months only, and we have this summary session as well. So I don't know what's happening, but I'm really scared.
Thank you.
Yeah, as for the corruption question, I think what Iveta said applies very well to the Austrian case. So the first reaction is when their allegations are being made, the first reaction will be, well, this is just one more attempt to silence the guy who's standing up for us, right? And then when you actually get that guy caught on tape, right, as happened on a certain Balearic island in 2017, they will resort to the second reaction, which is, well, okay, maybe our guy is corrupt too after all, but they're all corrupt. And who knows what they put in his drink that made him say those things, right? As for the question about the boundaries, I've been thinking about it for a couple of minutes now, and I really don't think what boundaries there are left in Austria that you could cross within the law. But of course, the law can be rewritten to push these boundaries, right? And this is a country where there have been voices in not one, but 2 parties calling for rewriting or updating declarations of human rights and the rights of refugees. So maybe that will be the next thing.
2 sentences really. Red lines. I repeat, we have it in legal system, in constitution, precisely defined. You are absolutely right that they can change the law. But I would like to stress, please, we have to be very careful, look at new regulation from EU. I repeat, Article 17, please be active, because not the mainstream media are under the regulation, under the law, but online platforms, not at all, not at all. It's asymmetric competition. Sure, these politicians, they do not need mainstream media. In my country, Fico is using only alternative media and online platform. He doesn't need mainstream media.
This is really an important question.
And this is really important thing.
No need for mess. Thank you so much. Daniela, please read the questions from Zoom.
I have 3 questions from our Zoom audience. The first one goes to Mr. Weidinger. It's from Ingrid from the Ministry of Interior. The question is if you have read the new Friedrich Ebert Mitte-Studie.
From Germany?
Friedrich Ebert Stiftungsstudie, Mitte-Studie.
The ministry is asking me if I read that study, right? Is that the question?
No. Yeah. And if yes, how would you compare the results to Austria? That's the question.
Well, to be completely honest, I did come across that study and I did download it. I also opened the file. I can't really make a substantiated statement on how it would compare.
I mean, if you want, I could tell you what it said, like the main findings, and then you compare it to Austria.
Thank you.
So the Mitte-Studie is a really big study in Germany, who's from a think tank that is close to the SPD. So it's not neutral, but it does really good work, and it tries to be as neutral as possible. And they do lots of findings, but also about right-wing extremism, how manifested it is in the population. And the last couple of years, it was always 2 to 3% manifested right-wing extremists, and now it switched to 8%. So it went up a lot. And they also say about party preferences, so the most is in the AfD. Then apparently it's the Liberals, which is interesting. Then it's the SPD, and only then it's the CDU, which is interesting as well. And then it's the Green Party, basically. Well, there's the left in between. And then it's the Green Party who has the least right-wing extremist theories, apparently. So maybe you can compare that to Austria.
Thank you very much. I think the tracks for Austria, especially, I do see a tendency for it to become more socially accepted, or people are not being as secretive about their party preference for the Freedom Party anymore. And I think that the pandemic and the protests against the pandemic were an important catalyst for that. They were an important catalyst for bringing the FPÖ back to its old strength. And also for Austria, there are numbers suggesting, the Soros Institute put out those numbers, suggesting that authoritarianism is on the rise. And, you know, like these classic statements, the country needs a strong leader who doesn't have to bother with parliament and stuff, you know. This authoritarianism has risen somewhat dramatically over the years of the pandemic. And I think there's a lot of trust to be gained back, not just by the parties who were in government during the pandemic, but trust in the political system per se, trust in the institutions of democracy. And that is certainly true for many countries, but particularly true for Austria.
Thank you. Other two?
Yeah, this is a question by Riza Banagiotou. She is a professor at the University of Athens, and her question is to Iveta concerning the sense of insecurity and disillusion felt by many citizens in your country. Nostalgia of communism is indeed very common, as everything felt safer, controlled, and less dangerous, Riza writes. And when people look back, do they really feel that they were actually more free?
They really feel it because they didn't miss the value of freedom. They were oriented and concentrated on standard of living and social security. And I have to stress that after the Second World War, Slovakia was one of the less developed countries in Europe. And post-Soviet industrialization meant for Slovakia really increase of standard of living. And because there was iron curtain, people compare it only with their own past, not with the surrounding situation. So really they evaluate it positively, that this have happened. And this is until now. Hospitals were built at that time, schools were built at that time, streets were built at that time, housing was built in that time, and was available to ordinary people, etc., through standard of living and valuation of their own life story. That's why they didn't miss freedom, only part of the society.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And Isabelle de Pomereux, she is a journalist in Germany, wonders about the Russian narrative element, which seems to be very strong and increasingly so in Germany's East. Is that an East German speciality, or is that happening in other ex-Soviet countries? Not only, it's my addition. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how can that type of narrative be counted?
Is that to me?
Yeah. Actually, it's to everyone and to Yvette in particular, mm-hmm. But please.
I mean, I've mentioned it before. It is a big problem. I mean, in all parties, even SPD, CDU in eastern counties, of course, they are closer to Russia. I mean, the people learned Russian songs, the Russian language in school, in kindergarten. They watched the movies and everything. So they are more connected to Russia. And of course, the West, because of their experience, Western Germany parts, are more connected to America or Great Britain or France. So that obviously plays a role. And I think what we need to explain better is that, for example, Russian media is state media, and so it's not neutral, and it has like a goal, and to explain that to people. But if you don't mind, if you think Putin is a good guy, then you don't mind that it's state media, right? So it's very hard to go around, except for like probably personal connections, and to talk to people about, but do you see that as well? And can we find a middle ground that maybe it's not great if the USA tries to do geopolitics in Germany or in Ukraine or whatever, but also Putin has a goal too, and then you can kind of compare and say, at least that one is a democracy, the other one isn't. So I think it's about finding common ground, and that's very hard to do.
My answer is very similar and easy. The role of the media and the power of media, I would like to stress. Do not forget how strong the propaganda was working and is working also now. And imagine before 1989, the fight of two propagandas from United States against Soviet bloc. And sure, anti-Americanism was widespread in former Central Eastern countries, among majority, like in the eastern part of Germany. Sure, it was everyday life, part of the life, this kind of propaganda. The same was on another side from United States, opposite kind of propaganda, Cold War, do not forget, please. And you cannot change the value system during one generation. I would like to repeat Ralph Dahrendorf's words that, okay, and you know how when he has said it, he then has written it to the book Revolution 1989. I had a chance to be at St. Anthony College, and he was my tutor. And I came immediately after November to St. Anthony, and full of enthusiasm how we will do it, change it, and our people will like democracy and freedom, etc. And he looked at me and said 3 sentences. Iveta, political system you can change during 6 months. Economic, 6 years. Value, 60 years. And I look at him, no, he was right. So we maybe expect that the value system is changeable quicker, but this is not the truth. And if there are mistakes and dissatisfaction, then the procedure is much longer.
Then it's 100 years.
Yeah.
I do thank the speakers. I thank all the questions. Let's take a break, 20-minute break. I thank you so much, and please, an applause for this incredible discussion. I invite you in Press Club Concordia and also the participants on Zoom just to first talk to each other and also think and tell Ivan is right here, what do you think would you do to combat, to promote democracy? I'm not even sure to say to combat far right, to promote democracy, and we shall at the end say a few ideas. Thank you very much. And on Zoom, the same thing. Daniela will summarize what our viewers on Zoom will say. Thank you so much. Please. Thank you for coming back after coffee. I would like to welcome the second panel, just as important for understanding other contexts. I think it was very important. I think it is very important And all of our European contexts event focus on putting people from different corners of Europe at the same table. I did not realize when we started doing our events that it was not very common. So, the second panel will also try to explore the far right, fight for democracy, and the red lines in 3 European countries, a bit more than 3. So, first, it will be, the first speaker will be Karolina Zbigniewska, journalist, editor-in-chief of Euractiv Poland, and she also teaches at the university, and she's very, very active in public TV space in Poland. The second speaker is Ramon González Ferris. He's a book author, columnist of El Confidencial in Spain. And the third speaker, Alberto Alemano, covers several countries at the same time. He is a true South European, I would say. He's Italian, he teaches in Paris, and he lives in Spain. And Alberto is a lawyer, both in Europe and in New York. He is a professor at HES Paris. He advocates for the democratization, if I can say so, of the European Union. And he's also the Europe Futures Fellow. I will start with Karolina. Karolina, a Polish friend of mine said to me once, I guess it's an expression in Polish, to the right of this, there is only the wall. And I don't know where is this wall in Poland. If in the past years, from the time that Law and Justice Party has been in power, well, they, as the governing party, have addressed all the issues that the far right addresses in other European countries. But now we have Confederacja that is to the right of Law and Justice Party. What differs them? I do understand that Confederacja is a confederation of 3 parties. You yourself, we met in March in Warsaw. You read that one of the leaders of Confederacja said, well, they're against Jews, feminists, LGBT, EU.
Abortion and
abortion. But then I read also that some even speak that it's really too bad, some other members of Confederacja, it's really too bad we cannot flog gays. I have also heard that some have said, well, should women really have the right to vote? And I'm just wondering, now that Poland has elections on the 15th of October, what is far right in Poland? Is there any red line? The word is yours.
Thank you very much for the question and for having me here today. What is far right in Poland? So definitely it's both. At the moment, it's both our ruling party and ruling coalition. So United Right, so-called, led by PiS, Law and Justice Party, whose leader is Jarosław Kaczyński, and Confederacja as well. Confederacja tries to be after the wall that you mentioned. However, it's used a little bit by PiS, and during elections now, PiS is taking over some of the further radical right narratives from Confederacja to itself, stealing not only these narratives, but also voters.
Can you please give us examples of further right?
So it's about the language of aggression towards minorities, and it's about the language now, it's very feasible because of the language of aggression against also Ukrainian migrants. So actually, we felt that there was a space to take over from Confederacja, who from the very beginning of the Russian aggression, full-scale aggression last February, was skeptical towards what Polish government was doing in terms of supporting Ukrainian people and Ukrainian soldiers. So it was against the war, but at the same time, it wasn't supporting the support from the Polish government. And now this similar approach of skepticism is being taken over by our government. You probably saw the headlines that we totally changed our behavior from being major Ukraine supporters and the drivers of international support, actually, for Ukraine, into supporting mainly our own military and stopping sending the arms and tanks to Ukraine because we need them. So it's actually the turn before the elections. And Ukrainians that are staying in Poland, residing in Poland, over 1 million of them, I have a feeling that they feel that it's just an electoral play, that it's just a cynical reason to change this narrative as regards the support to Ukrainians. So in short, what's the difference? I would say that Confederacja is nationalistic liberal, and peace is national socialist. I know it doesn't sound good. Yes, actually, it cannot sound worse. And as regards the red lines, I was thinking about red lines in the context of violence. Where's the red line before the violence starts? And Sergei Guriev co-written a book about not only, but focusing on Russia, about spin dictators. And he was saying that the type of dictatorship has changed from the 20th century, from these dictators like Mao or Hitler, who were caused millions of deaths. Now it's all about being smug, westernized, and about manipulation of votes that can secure you the monopoly of power. So the goal is exactly the same, but you do it in the white gloves. But he wrote the book before the full-scale aggression of Russia onto Ukraine began. So it's the worst that can happen. But in Poland, as in many other countries we are speaking about today, the major enemies are from within, not from without. Despite they are being treated as foreign agents, so Donald Tusk, the leader of democratic opposition in Poland, is called the foreign agent of Germany, of the European Union, and generally of Western attack on the Polish sovereignty. So the red line, in my view, has been crossed already. I don't know if you are, because we see what happened in the US 2 years ago on the 6th of January. There was this attack on Capitol that actually was the effect of the growth of hate speech of Donald Trump against democratic institutions and politicians in the US. He didn't say go on Capitol, but there was this general environment of hate and violent language. And we have seen the growth of such violent language and actually tolerance to the use of aggression since the electoral campaign of Law and Justice in 2015, when they actually used the Nazi-like cliches towards immigrants and refugees, calling them the carriers of strange viruses that we are not immune to. Thank you very much. And from then on, from this very violent xenophobic campaign, the growth of tolerance towards aggression was increasing, not only among politicians, and not only among the politicians of the ruling party and the further to the right coalition party, but also among the voters who, according to the research, don't have any qualms now about talking about their direct physical violence, for example, to representatives of Ukrainian refugees or other minorities.
You mean they call for violence against Ukrainians in
They
Poland?
sometimes, for example, they attack someone who was on the street, and they started, discursive fight, which turned into the real violence, and they are now proud of it. So it's now this ambience of approval of physical aggression. And what I was aiming at by pointing at capital assault. 2 years earlier in Poland, on the 18th of January of 2019, the mayor, the president we call it, of Gdańsk was assassinated during the charity event. And it was exactly the same ambience of violence and hatred against political opponents that led to that. So we have that. We have crossed red lines, and anticipating potential question how to stop that, I have no idea, because sadly it's the same, well, it's not the same level, but it's lurking the goal of achieving the same level of aggression among also the voters of the opposition. We are going in the same direction. In 2019, there was a research held by Warsaw University about dehumanization of political opponents. Actually, according to this research, the supporters of the democratic oppositions are dehumanizing their political opponents more than the governmental party.
Well, just one question before we go to Spain. You didn't mention women. You didn't mention abortion. There seems to be a competition who is more against women in Poland. Yes, a lot of women came into the streets to protest one of the strictest laws against abortion in Europe, compared only to Malta. But at the same time, I think also that the civil opposition, the civil, Tusk, etc., they're not really sure how to support women or if they should support women and abortion.
Well, Donald Tusk is liberalizing his approach towards abortion because in the past, indeed, he used to be a kind of a center politician in terms of being also center conservative, because we still are a little bit above average Catholic country, so also conservative country. So it was kind of a mass taking what our society wanted. But now Donald Tusk has changed, and he wants to liberalize the law, abortion law, while PiS is going against liberalization. Actually, now abortion is de facto illegal. De jure, it's legal in 2 cases, but de facto illegal. While Confederacja is totally against abortion, and if they get to power, they say they will ban it totally.
Thank you. Ramon. As I said, Ramon is a journalist and a commentator for El Confidencial, which is one of the most important online media in Spain. Ramon, Spain was very proud it didn't have the far right. Then all of a sudden, the far right came, very different from the rest of Europe, also because it has to do with Spanish nationalism. Then they didn't quite win these elections as we expected, but they have not disappeared. I also have to say, as I used to work for a Spanish newspaper, and on social media, I have quite a lot of colleagues who are either retired or active, and I'm surprised to what extent quite a few of them support the far right. So it is not something isolated. As an introduction, especially because Spain is rather distant from this part of Europe, I would just like to say that in terms of rights of women, gender violence, LGBT rights, Spain was on the forefront of Europe. It was the 3rd country in Europe or in the world, I'm not sure, that approved gay marriage 20 years ago. So it is interesting that 20 years later, all these rights that were approved 20 years ago didn't really sink in the population, and then the far-right Vox party actually focused on women. They did not focus so much on foreign affairs. It was about women and, of course, Spanish nationalism. They also did something, I have to say it, in one of the Spanish federal units where they're in coalition government, one of the first measures was to ban bicycle paths. I cannot really think of it happening elsewhere if far right isn't in a bicycle path, and of course they approve of bullfights. Now, explain to us the rise and the fall, but not disappearance, especially because in Spain, very often analysts like to comment other countries and say it's the same everywhere in Europe. I don't think it's the same, and that's why we have this discussion to understand the local context. Please.
Thank you very much for the question and for having me. A quick history lesson. 2011, the crisis is very bad in Spain, and the Popular Party, which is a traditional conservative party, gets an absolute majority, so the Popular Party can govern, make reforms, etc., to take the country out of the crisis. But a part of the Popular Party thinks that it is being very soft. It raises taxes instead of lowering them. It doesn't ban the gay marriage that was approved some years before by the Socialist Party. It does not change the abortion law. So a part of the conservatives think that the Popular Party is not a conservative party anymore. So they create a small party in 2013 called Vox, which at first it's a very conservative party, but I would say a traditional conservative party, much more conservative than the Popular Party, but their issues are traditional conservative issues. They do not get a single seat for 6 years. They don't get a single seat in the regional parties for 6 years. They are very bad. They don't have political experience. They don't use very well the media. And they become a sort of laboratory of ideas. They try a lot of different things, all of them very conservative. They try to push an issue that it's a non-issue in Spain, like the freedom for carrying arms. It fails. They propose to build a fence in the south of Spain, as in the south of the United States. It fails. They try a lot of things. They fail all the time until 2017, when the independentists in Catalonia run an illegal referendum, which is seen as a very hard aggression against the constitution, the unity of the country. It's a great aggression against half of the Catalans who are against independentism. And Vox then decides, it's not that it wasn't in their program, it was, but then decide that they are the anti-nationalist, anti-independentist party. Of course, there are a lot of things that have in common with other far-right parties in Europe. They are against feminism, they are against LGBT, they are against globalization, they are more or less against the European Union. They have changed in that. They are changing in economic issues. They were very, let's say, neoliberal in the beginning. They are becoming more like Le Pen, more interventionist, more for the welfare state. But their single most important issue, which is the single most important issue in Spanish politics right now, which is independentism, the nationalism in the regions, the way we distribute money among regions from the central government. They become the anti-independentist party. So they go from nothing in 2016 to 15% of the votes in 2019. They have a bright future because the left party which governs Spain, the Socialist Party, is governing in a sort of informal coalition with Catalan and Basque nationalist parties. So the rhetoric against independentism, the rhetoric against the pact between the Socialist Party and independentists really creates great distress in Spanish politics. not only on the right, also on the left. But the Popular Party, and it's something that most of us did not expect, the traditional Conservative Party who approves the abortion law, who is for gay marriage, who sometimes goes to demonstrations for LGBT rights, not fully comfortable, but it's more or less there, convinces most of the right in Spain that they are the only useful party against the left. Only the Popular Party can win the left, only the Popular Party can govern Spain. There is no red line. The Popular Party governs with Vox in some regions in the center of the country, poorer regions, more rural regions. There never was a cordon sanitaire in Spain. Vox demonstrate that it's not very good governing. It's quite good protesting, but it's not very good governing. So they go from 15% of the vote and 50 seats in the 2019 elections to 11% of the vote and 30 seats in last July elections. There was a great divide inside Vox. Part of the party was a very conservative party, but I would say that not very different from the traditional Republicans in the United States or the traditional Tories in the UK. A part of the party was more for conspiracy theories. They are really fans of the Polish government and the Hungarian government. They are against vaccines. There was a great fight inside the party. And now with these bad results in the July elections, they have decided to go fully far right. They have fired the leader of the conservative moderate, let's say moderate, it's not moderate, but let's say that in the party. So they have become fully, I'd say, orthodox far right.
Give us a couple of examples.
Couple of examples, vaccines. They fired, they had a doctor in the party who was very much for vaccines and thought that the vaccine program in Spain was good and everybody should vaccinate. He was fired. There was a part of the country which was, you can disagree with that, but was fiscally responsive. They thought that they have to equilibrate budgets and these things that traditional parties do. He was fired because they think that they have to lower taxes and increase the social spending, only for Spaniards, of course. They have been having problems deciding what use they do with religion. Spanish, as you have said, is a much more progressive country that usually is seen from abroad. They are now trying to put religion in the center of their agenda. So they are changing because they have lost and they have to imagine new things. They are still a kind of a laboratory of ideas. And now they are going to try a full far-right agenda. And it's difficult to know if this will work. But as you have said, nobody expected that there was a room in Spain for a far-right party. So who knows?
Well, just a very brief comment, and then I will ask Alberto a few questions. Well, first, I would like to mention when one speaks about Spanish separatists, we are also speaking of, in the case of the Basque Country, of assassins. So it's not only that they were independent, they were not only promoting their independent ideas with words, but also with deeds.
Yeah.
And some of them were in jail. So that's one thing. That's one thing to understand. And the second thing that now will probably polarize Spain, and I don't know how it will be received in Europe, and I don't know if anyone knows that Spain now, the socialist government in Spain promised that they will have new languages in the European Commission. So it is Catalan, it is Gallego, and it is the Basque or Euskera. Catalan is a traditional language. Gallego, I don't really know, but when it comes to Euskera, a lot of people don't even speak it. They still have to learn it. And when you go to the Basque country, you see they don't even have words. So they like take the Spanish word and make it Basque. So I don't really know how it will function in Brussels. And I can, and the other day, when the first person was speaking in the parliament in Galician, the Vox walked out. I just wonder how he's going to work with the voters and with the population.
In Spain, everybody speaks Spanish, but in 3 regions, Catalonia, Basque Country, and Galicia, there are also official languages that are spoken by more or less half of the population. So half the population has Spanish as first language, half the population in these 3 regions have the other official language as their mother tongue, but everybody speaks Spanish. And they are official in the regions, but they were not official in the Spanish parliament. They are now since last week. It's the single most difficult issue in Spanish politics. There are great consensus in Spain about fiscal issues, about the European Union, but there is not a great consensus about what to do with regional languages and
with identities.
With regional identities. The argument of Vox is we have fostered so much the regional identities that the Spanish identity is no more. We have a Catalan identity, we have a Basque identity, we have an Andalusian identity, but we have no more Spanish identity because the education is in the hands of the regional governments. So let's get back that to Madrid to foster a Spanish identity against regional identities. The left, in part, believes that those languages are part of the Spanish tradition, which they are, and are as Spanish are the Spanish languages, which they are, but it is doing these kind of things now because they need the votes of the regional parties. I don't say that they don't believe in that, but mostly they need the votes. And terrorism is one of the most, most nationalism, regional nationalism is pacific, it's civic. I don't like it, but it's democratic. But there was terrorism for 40 years in the Basque Country and in the rest of Spain. It killed 1,000 people, children, women, not only military, not only policemen, members of the police. And it ended in 2011 when the terrorist ban was defeated. They didn't recognize the defeat. They said that they were stopping killing because they thought that politically it was no longer useful. But they have never said sorry. They had never recognized that they were a terrorist ban. And it's been a very long hangover, 12 years after the last people was killed by the terrorist party, the terrorist band ETA. We still have that with us. It has not gone. We haven't found a consensus about what to do with that past, very hurtful past. So it's still very much part of the Spanish politics. And Vox, its leader, was a victim of ETA. ETA tried to kill him. So it's very much part of Spanish politics and of Vox program.
Thank you so much. Alberto, as I said, is a lawyer, professor, covers several countries physically, not only intellectually. And Alberto, I would like you to comment a few things about the government in Italy. Do we really know if Giorgia Meloni has changed her attitudes since she is the prime minister? We should also not forget, as you say, that she's in coalition, so we don't really know her true colors. How far has she gone in comparison to what she has promised? And do you think that as of now, or as it is right now, her party, the Fratelli d'Italia, is the Democratic Party? And then I'll ask about France, please.
Well, you know, Italy is, and it has been a laboratory of politics. So over the last 30 years, exactly when I left Italy, we could see experimentation happening, right? Mr. Berlusconi supporting and, as we say, legitimizing the far right, the fascist party, the neo-fascist party, Movimento Sociale. This is the party that a very young and talented politician, Giorgia Meloni, took over and has been scoring approximately 5, 6, 7% under her realm. And then all of a sudden, she managed to cannibalize the other far-right party, which is the League, separatist originally, then anti-European. And then basically she revealed herself as somebody who, for the first time, would have been leading and composing a government through a coalition that would have neo-fascist colors. Hence, as usual, us, the bourgeois, comfortable people start screaming, ooh, what is going to happen? Well, not much on paper, right? She embraced the Draghi agenda, full continuity on economic matters. She show up and take selfies with Ursula von der Leyen, with NATO Secretary General, absolutely in line with, let's say, the political correctness. However, there is a dark side of Giorgia Meloni that we don't know yet, because it has been only unveiled on the ground. She basically took over from Salvini rhetoric, which is anti-migration, anti-LGBTs, revival of the family values, teaming up with Viktor Orban, and trying to follow that blueprint just on social issues. She cannot afford politically to go further because she has no support from Forza Italia, her major ally, together with Salvini. Matteo Salvini, the leader of the League, is the one who actually opened up the Overton window. He's the one who has been crossing the red lines by basically blaming migrants for all what was wrong in Europe. He's the one who has been blaming Europe and bashing Europe for all what is wrong in Italy. He's the culprit, but he's not under the radar because he's just the deputy prime minister, but he's ready to jump the boat anytime. Is this Italian government anti-democratic? Well, there are checks and balances in the coalition. There are in the constitution. Our constitution is clearly the product of the Second World War. So it's very nicely written in a way that creates compensation between legislature, judiciary, and of course, academia, because many of our members of the Constitutional Court are academics, tend to be independent individuals. So we have a strong basis there. But the instinct of Giorgia Meloni, and this is your question, is not only authoritarian, but is anti-democratic. Why? Because she's already flirting with the idea of injecting a presidentialist model in which the president of the republic would be in full departure from the philosophy underpinning the constitution, the direct electoral suffrage for appointing that individual. And that individual historically, meaning the president of the republic, despite having limited prerogative, has been playing a fundamental role in, for instance, appointing technocratic governments over the last 30 years. Technocratic governments that really allow Italy to float and to remain a country accepted by the overall international community and the international market, which of course do matter a lot. So there is an anti-democratic instinct, as Werner Müller often said, a political theorist in Princeton. Basically, being anti-democratic today means to claim full autonomy and full monopoly in representing the people. And when you hear Giorgia Meloni, she's the only one, according to her stance, who can represent the instances of the people. There's no space for anybody else, not even for the members of her own coalition parties. And this claim of exclusivity is what makes her a populist. And this is what makes populists very anti-democratic, because there's no room for pluralism today in Italy, not even within that coalition. And at some point...
could you give us some examples on that?
Yeah, I think examples come from the first departure she made. It was almost a year. She had been in power. And she basically decided to send a strong signal to his own constituency by basically bashing the banks and saying that the banks were making too much money. And therefore, she decided unilaterally, without even talking and discussing with his own members of the coalition, that banks had to basically be taxed on their major. And this was a decision that had very limited economic underpinning, because basically she wasted 10 billion euros when she wanted to simply recollect 2 billion. So it was simply economically not really well-funded. But the temptation to get into the short term and to deliver something to the good of her constituency is very strong, but it backfired. After that, she made a similar claim by basically saying that the prices between the Italian islands and the peninsula should have been also be capped. It also went very badly, because this is clearly against the European law, and liberalization is affecting service providers, so it was really a bad idea. It backfired, but defiantly she claimed the motherhood of those ideas and saying, I'm gonna try again if you just let me stay in power. And this explains why she's so popular, because the average Italian voters find her very fresh, very outsider, despite being an insider. She's been a minister in governing of Berlusconi. She's been around for a long time. She's a professional politician. You see how skilled she is. She's very talented, but she's still believing that she has a chance to be alone governing. And I think this is the dark side. The dark side that is manifested in this very anti-stance she has. And the attempt, since we're talking about red lines, to not only overcoming those red lines, which Salvini already did for her, but also reestablishing some red lines, in her view. The fact of bringing back the value of the family, the fact of bringing back Judeo-Christian values as the driving force for demography in Italy, as a response to the migration crisis, is a clear ideological picture that she has been concocting with Mr. Orban, and which is also sounding appealing to PIS in Poland. And this is the pan-European dimension of this conversation, how Ms. Meloni is contributing to sketching yet another time. It's not the first time that the right wing, the hard right in Europe tried to connect the dots and try to make a common proposal, value proposition to the electorate. We heard this in 2014, we heard this again in 2019, and we're going to hear a lot of this in 2024 also because Giorgia Meloni is also a European political leader. She sits in the European Council, but she also represents the European conservatives. She leads the European political party with PIS, with Poland. So these are calling the shots in deciding whether they are going to join the European Popular Party, let's say the traditional conservatives, or rather will be tempted to go to the far right, because the far right is pushing them to basically situate themselves more to the right. And this is the very dangerous game. Will they find a center of gravity towards the conservatives? And we see the EPP, Manfred Weber idea is exactly to do that, to leverage on that vote. In Poland, in Italy, means a lot of MEPs coming into the new parliament, or rather will be tempted to, to team up with the far right, with Identity and Democracy, basically with parties like the League, like Marine Le Pen, who are extremely pushing them to take even further stances, which might often, and perhaps even more crucially, open this Overton window of what is accepted today. The political discourse might be expanded even further, because at the pan-European level, we never witnessed these kind of red lines being crossed. These remain a prerogative of the national political debates. But I never heard something anti-Semitic or anti-LGBT per se being said in the plenary of the European Parliament.
I want to ask you, would you feel it is being a black Italian? Would you feel it is? Would you feel it is if you're a black Italian?
Definitely not. I think Italy had a very difficult integration story, because already Mr. Bossi, who was the founder of the League, immediately capitalized on this sentiment of suspicion vis-a-vis the foreigners. So I often remember the story of my grandmother, very Catholic, but feeling in solidarity with all the Moroccans coming in the north of Italy and inviting her and having lunch with them. And I remember as a child to remember some French words exchanged, because this Moroccan could speak French with my grandmother, and the frustration my grandmother had in feeling that Italy was not feeling the same sense of solidarity towards those people. And things have changed, because now we see the first and second generation. Some of them are very successful entrepreneurs, some of them are very successful politicians. They try to get in, but they struggle. They struggle because culturally Italy hasn't changed much. And Italy is and remains a very racist country, because otherwise you would not explain our electoral score. And it's just too tempting for a new generation of political leaders to just capitalize on that sentiment, as opposed to come up with solutions of integration and positivity. It's just too tempting.
You know, Europe claims to be this plural society of tolerance, and it is also very interesting how you were explaining the political framework in Italy, but not only you, all speakers, and then we sort of pass through these social values as if they were not essential, and people in everyday life, that's what they see. Is there racism? Is there no racism? This is very much this is what you see as, as an individual. Can you just briefly compare to France, where you teach? Because everyone is fearing that in 2027, Marine Le Pen may be the next president, fearing. Should we fear, should we not fear? What values is she bringing, or not? Or now we have the further to the right in France?
Happy to say a few words about France from my perspective in France. I've been living there since 2009, so I spend time with my students. I spend time with the media, talking a lot, writing, being part of the public conversation. I'm a contributor of Le Monde, which tries to unpack all those issues all the time. Before getting to that, just a word on what you said about the unease of being diverse in a country like Italy. You know, there have been the so-called Albanian waves when the Albanians came. You had the North African coming in. So this has already reached significant proportion of people who actually settle and coexist, I would say, peacefully in broader terms, and even get their chances in the country. So that's the positive news. However, there's a story of disenfranchisement, which is extremely political, meaning that most of those individuals do not exercise political votes, either because they don't have the right or because they don't feel represented by anyone. So this is the big challenge. You know, when you have over 1 million Romanians living in Lombardia, and basically 5% of them voting and no candidates coming from Romania, then we have a problem, right, in the social tissue of society. And this is another big mystery, why European political parties, why national parties don't chase for that vote, right? Because you can become a very successful Romanian politician if you set up your Romanian group in Lombardia and you run as a councillor. So these are all open questions that I think we don't study enough, but they exist on the ground in Europe, right? Political representativeness for people who are not born in those particular countries. Coming to France, I think the French story and the story of the far right in France, when you look at Jean-Marie Le Pen and his daughter taking over, is not so dissimilar from Italy. I mean, these germs of fascism after Vichy that remains alive, very on the fringe for a long time, melancholic party, just appealing to those who are still alive, basically. And this is the story for a long time. And then we have this red line, the time in which Jean-Marie Le Pen managed to reach the second round of the elections. You might remember that, which is similar to when Mr. Berlusconi endorsed Mr. Fini as a mayor of Rome. We are in the 90s, end of the 90s. This is the moment, right, of legitimization of that particular right. And the story since then is a story that basically developed in parallel. So we see a sentiment which is predominantly of anti-migration, but in a very different context because of Algeria, because of the colonial history of France. So it's a very different story to get this message conveyed in France than to do it in Italy. It's a story of social rights, so still trying to deliver for the people because they are claiming to be generous. So the state has to be generous, while at the same time being libertarian. So there is this very strong element of commonalities between the two. And then finally, the full legitimization of Marine Le Pen, who basically managed through scale by getting a lot of people elected at the local level, at the national level, and of course in the last parliament, in the Assemblée Nationale, and therefore getting the volume. And here, that's the difference, cordon sanitaire. The fact that all of a sudden, the French political system, Cinquième République, is no longer able to come together and to say, we are against those people. Why? It's a matter of scale. These people went beyond being marginal. When you go, depending on the electoral system, above 1/5 of the preferences of the people going to that party, and I think this is the German challenge now, does the cordon sanitaire still hold? It's still the right way of doing things, right? Just rejecting ideologically, because you want to defend the Constitution, are very well intentioned, is it the right answer, or you're rather pushing and fueling and therefore giving some support to those far-right instances, which are anti-constitutional, anti-authoritarian. And I think this is the dilemma that we face in Europe at a pan-European scale. This is the dilemma we face in France. As a refresher, the French President of the Republic doesn't have a majority at the moment in the Assemblée Nationale, and every single legislative file, he has to look for a majority. And when the Marine Le Pen, Rassemblement National, supports his file, nobody complains, because that's the price to be paid. So, the cordon sanitaire is no longer there, and that means that it's not so dystopian to imagine that in the future, the next step might be to have not only Marine Le Pen or somebody from her party running the country, but actually having Les Républicains, which is the conservative right, which is shrinking, not disappearing like the socialists, dealing with them. And we could see how Zemmour, who is the candidate now running the Reconquête, which is a party even more to the right of the far right, who has been trying to become the Secretary General, being the leader of the Républicains, of the mainstream party. So you see this kind of dynamic happening now. Marion Maréchal Le Pen, very Instagrammable, because she's not only the nephew of Marine Le Pen, she carries the same name, but she has been basically doing her homework. For 2 years, she's set up a political school for the far right in Lyon. She's now running, she's the deputy of Monsieur Zemmour. She's extremely popular among the youth. She looks fresh. She has a reassuring message when it comes to Christian values and conservative values, and she's clearly conveying and projecting a model of society which is totally antithetical to the liberal Macron proposal. So she has a chance, they have a chance of actually gathering all these people, and their major big test will be the European elections, in the same way as we're going to be seeing as Vox is going to be scoring there. We're going to be seeing how Reconquête, a relatively new party, are going to be scoring there with this big, visible, again, Instagrammable leaders like Zemmour, you know, writer, essayist, very controversial, but very loved in that context, and Maréchal Le Pen. So the European elections have been secondary elections, elections that are not felt by citizens as making much of a change for their life. So this basically is skewing the process towards them. Because at the end of the day, if the Spaniards were not feel comfortable to vote Vox at the national level because they saw that they are not governing well at the local level, well, they're going to say, who cares? It's just the European Parliament. It won't matter much, right? This is happening and will happen in favor both of party like Vox, most likely, and most likely for Reconquête and perhaps also Marine Le Pen, who is preparing for the European elections.
Just a very brief question. Is there a red line on what you can say in France?
That's a very good question, because in France, I think the role of religion is very different than in a country like Italy, right? It's not mobilized, it's a secular country, so you don't see Marine Le Pen making calls for family values in the same way as Giorgia Meloni does. Anti-Semitism has always been part of the country, so I wouldn't say this is a red line. The European Union is certainly not a team that is stopping people from being critical. So perhaps there is in France still some patriotism which is owned and belong by everyone. See, this might be the red line. It's France. France is something that the President of the Republic, as a progressive or liberal, is very proud of, in the same way as Marine Le Pen. In Spain, where I live, I don't feel the same. You know, the Spanish flag has become a prerogative of Vox and the EPP. So if I show up with my kids who are growing up in Spain with a Spanish flag or a bracelet, I immediately convey the message of being right-wing, basically. And this is very scary, right? When you, as a citizen, you can no longer be proud of your passport, simply because this has been hijacked by one ale of the political spectrum. And this is what we are seeing in Spain. We're going to be seeing this in many other countries. I guess in Poland might not be so far away from this. If you talk to conservative thinkers like Anna Applebaum and others, I don't think they are very far from this analysis. They are conservatives, but they feel a bit uncomfortable of not really being considered as Poles today, because they are standing for values that they are not considered as legitimate. So that's what really keeps me awake a bit at night, in particular because I live at the interstices of Europe. I don't live in any country, right? I'm always in that space. And I also been living in the epoch of the end of history, right? Mr. Fukuyama, when he had the intuition of the end of history, was actually thinking about the European Union. He said, this is the postmodern way of doing nation-state building. And actually, I felt refuge myself 30 years ago in the European Union because it was a very secure space, right? It was great to be there. It was perfect. It was an irreversible process. Everybody would have had a chance. There was a Republican spirit, right, to be lifted out of where you were born if you were just part of that process. And all of this is really up in the air now. I think the very essence of what the European integration project is, what is the direction, is all questioned, which is good in a way because it became complacent. So that's where the opportunities are.
We shall discuss that later on at the beginning of next year. Are there any questions or comments online, offline? Everyone understood everything? Please, Anne-Catherine, just a microphone.
Hi, I was wondering whether you could tell us what the difference is, why didn't it work in Spain for Vox, and who helped, like what helped that it didn't turn like it turned in all the other countries?
It's not easy. One way, there are great consensus in Spain about some things that are very much more disputed in other countries. 80% of the population is for the gay marriage, 80% of the population is for the abortion law. It's not a very religious country. So there are some things, ideological things that I think that are there. Another question is the electoral system. It's very difficult to create a party in the whole country because of the system that only gives seats to the first 3 parties in each province. So there's a part of the electoral system too. And there is another thing that the Popular Party is very strong locally. It has very deep roots in the small villages, in the towns, in the regional parliaments, and has been more or less able to explain that because of that electoral system, because that political system, if the right is divided in 2 parties, it will never govern again. When the ideological blocks are split in different parties, it's much more difficult to get enough seats to govern. So the Popular Party has more or less been able to explain to the people on the right wing in Spain, if you vote for Vox, the left is going to govern forever, which is more or less true. And one last reason is that the leadership of the party is not very good. They are not very, they have very good communication in the social media. They have no media, traditional media that supports them, but they feel they don't need it. But I think that they are trying to impose in Spanish politics some ideas that there is no demand for them. They have, for example, in the immigration case, it's very difficult to make a strong argument against immigration in Spain, because not only the economy has been based on immigration for 20 years in construction or on agriculture, but 40% of the immigration in Spain speaks Spanish and is Catholic because it's Latin American. And there is a great taboo, luckily, in not being against Latin American immigration. So they are not against immigration, they're against Muslims, which are less, I'd say that 15% of the immigration in Spain. So there are different reasons. I wouldn't discard them. They can come back, of course they can. I think in Germany, there was a time when a lot of people thought that Alternative for Germany would not grow as it has been doing. But it is true that there are some reasons that have made them less relevant than you could have expected.
Any other question, please, in the back? One, the gentleman with glasses, and then I can see a woman here. All 3.
Thank you very much. My name is...
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Ulrich Schneckener. I'm a professor of international relations at a university in Germany, but I'm here as a visiting fellow right now at IDM Vienna. Yeah, first of all, thank you for this panel discussion. And if I may, if you allow, I would like to do 2 comments, one specific and one more general one. The specific goes to what has been said about Italy, and I think I could really very much agree what you have presented. However, I would wondering, and you were talking about the electoral system also, and I'm wondering, I think if we talk about Meloni and her success, we also have to mention the role of the center and center-left parties in Italy, because I think the result of the election was basically due to the electoral law to some extent, which was better exploited by the by the right-wing bloc, whereas the left were probably incapable. They were not able to strike an equal coalition. And they might have won the election, actually, if they would have done so. And so a Meloni government could have been easily, maybe not easily, but it could have been prevented, actually, if we would have not seen these rivalries, mainly also personal rivalries on the left and the center left in Italy. I don't know whether you agree with that.
And the question?
The second comment is more general and refers to this panel and the first panel as well. And I think, and here is also, for me, it's also how we can deal with that. And I think if we think about populists and the logic of populism, I think one of the most important thing is that populist parties, and I think across the board, I think it refers to most of the cases we've heard, is that they can play this anti-establishment card all over, despite the fact that they already be part of the establishment when they govern, they can still play this us versus them card. And I think it was Jörg Haider in Austria, 94. He has, I think, invented one of the most forceful slogans in populism ever, when he said, Sie sind gegen uns, Sie sind gegen ihn, weil für euch ist. So they are against him because he is for you.
Excuse me, our time is running out. Do you mind
Sorry, I just
asking a
want to say
question?
that this us and them rhetoric, so we represent the pure people versus the kind of elite, political elite, and this means not only politicians, but media, scientists, all together, that this kind of rhetoric, they can go on playing. And the question is, what can we do against this?
Thank you so much. In green?
Yes, hello, thank you very much for this very informative discussion. I have a quick question at Karolina.
Please introduce yourself.
At Karolina Zbytniewska, Malvina Talik Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe. I have a quick question, Karolina Zbytniewska. So we have a record number of women on electoral lists in Poland and also on Konfederacyja's list, 39%. They are not on top of those, on top positions, but still we know Konfederacja is an openly misogynistic party, a party that sometimes says that women should not vote, that women are part of men's property. So how would you explain that? Why are there, as for Poland, that many women candidating for Konfederacja?
Thank you. And the third, I saw a third hand, or I didn't? There was a third. Javier?
My name is Javier Luque from the International Press Institute. There are two quick questions. One is a little bit for all the panelists, the role of the pandemic in the growth of conspiracy theories that were later, and how they are linked, to far right. In all these countries. And the second one, it's a little bit more specific about Spain. What's the role of Isabel Díaz Ayuso, the president of Madrid, populist, and also Madrid, one of the strongholds of Vox in the results of the far-right party in the latest elections.
Thank you so much. Alberto? Oh, and there is one online, and then we shall do just one.
There is another question by Isabel de Pomodoro. It's to Alberto, how Maréchal's view of society does fundamentally differ from Macron. And she wonders why Macron is so hated in France.
Thank you. We shall start with Alberto and then go. Alberto, go ahead.
It's a great question about Macron. Let's start from there. If democratic success should be measured on output legitimacy, meaning the ability of political leaders to deliver, well, Macron should stay there, right, forever. He cannot, because there's an extra mandate. But there's large agreement that the kind of reforms he tried were not bad for the country. The country is not doing bad in terms of economic, but he's certainly not doing well in terms of social cohesion. And as you probably remember, the first promise of the president was exactly to bridge those gaps. So I think this might explain why, again, also because the electoral system, Macron never managed to get above 20%. Basically, his movement, which is not even a party, never went beyond 20%. So he's always floating on that line. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that at the end of the day, most of the French voters didn't support him initially, and they continue not to support him. On Javier, the role of COVID in fooling the far right, I think it would be a great PhD dissertation. I'm sure there are people writing about this. What I could observe was this initial phase, this temptation of the far right to show how libertarian they were, and to push back against vaccination, to bash confinement measures, to then kind of recede, and then to realize that perhaps they should also have to take a shot because they would have made it popular. That's what we have been seeing right across Europe in general terms. And comment on Italy, you're absolutely right. Probably the current Meloni-led government is more the result of a failure of the left and the center-led party, than a success of the right. What happened, explaining very simple terms, you basically have all the party from the center right to the right to come together, and they just show up, in the way in which Italian politics is done, in Mr. Berlusconi's house a couple of days before the deposit of the program, and they said, okay, let's do it together. We don't know what we have in common, but we're gonna show up together, our three faces, and we're gonna win. And whereas on the left, as usual, we had not only the Partito Democratico, who might have had some chances under the leadership of Enrico Letta, former prime minister, and widely visible across the country and Europe, but there was fragmentation led by many personalities. So 2 or even 3 parties in the center, right? Carlo Calenda, Renzi, former prime minister, fighting one another and basically fragmenting even further this proposal. And if, of course, you don't make history with counterfactual, but if they had found a similar agreement, opportunistic in nature, we would have had a completely different course of history, and we would have probably stopped, in the name of a perhaps cordon sanitaire, the current government today. So that's a very acute observation.
Thank you, Ramon, and then we shall come to the most important thing about women. Ramon, about Madrid and
Madrid.
Ayuso.
The regional president of Madrid is Isabel Díaz Ayuso, who is a woman from the Popular Party, who is on the right side of the Popular Party, what we in Spain call very strangely liberal. She's pro very low taxes. She has some libertarian rhetoric. She likes Margaret Thatcher, and she's got that kind of old conservatism that the Popular Party has, I would say, in great part abandoned. The Popular Party, I think, looks more like the traditional CDU in Germany than the Tories in the UK. But she still has that kind of what we call also neoliberalism, aggressive, pro-business, etc. And she's seen as, for the left, she's seen sometimes as the example that the PP has some far right inside. I wouldn't say that is the case. But what she has done is, and I don't agree with what you said, what she has done is make irrelevant Vox in the Madrid politics. And that is true. She has made irrelevant Vox. She doesn't need their support because she has an absolute majority in the local government of the city of Madrid. Vox is also irrelevant. So I think it's her ideology. I think it's her character. But I think it's quite intelligent strategically for the party to have the leader, Feijóo, which is a very bland, conservative, not very interesting, with that very strong ideas, and Isabel Díaz Ayuso as the example that the party can also be vibrant ideologically. So I think I don't think it's only strategically, but really a different ideological perspective, but I think it works well for them. They don't like each other, but they are useful for each other. About the pandemic, I think the pandemic in Spain and Vox made very clear what I was trying to say before, that Vox has not decided if it's a party of the establishment or if it's a party of the anti-establishment, because their members belong to the traditional elites in Spain. Their first economic program was written by a member of the Bank of Spain. Their leader in Europe is what in Spain we call a state lawyer, the very elite of lawyers of the government, of the state. Santiago Abascal, its leader, has been a professional politician for all his life. And at the same time, I have another commentary before said, they are trying to get the vote of anti-establishment in the right. The anti-establishment vote on the left is for Podemos. So, and the pandemics, when we all expected that they would grow a lot, it split the party in two. Should we be anti-vaccines or shouldn't we? as I said before, a doctor in the party was fired. Should we try to break the law and go to the street without the mask? Or we are a party of the establishment and we always abide the law? So it did something very bad for them, which is splitting them between these two stools that I have tried to explain.
Thank you. Carolina, and women in Poland.
But maybe first, the question, how can we deal with what's going on?
Go ahead.
Because I was thinking about this, and as I said in my first part, it's very difficult, but I looked into How Democracies Die by Daniel Ziblatt and Stephen Levitsky that were writing basically about the institution of gatekeepers, that we shouldn't invite far-right into the governments in the first place. So we committed this original sin in Poland already in 2006, when PiS was not a far-right party yet, but they invited to the government far-right, then far-right, non-existing anymore, League of Polish Families, and also outright physically violent party, like the traditional agrarian populist party Samoobrona. So I would say it was the general sin that we committed, and we are past that. But if somewhere far-right is not in government yet, don't let them into the government.
Excuse me, just a follow-up question. But what if they're 40% or 30%?
Well, if it's impossible, if they win, that's another story. It's about parties that win, but they need to build a coalition.
Okay.
And for opportunistic reason, they invite far-right or extreme right. The other thing is the platforms, and it's a digital side of the story, because actually social media and media are amplifying negative emotions and also the toxic emotions. So I think it's, I know it's not in the part of the conversation theoretically that we are having, but actually it is, that we should create gatekeeping algorithms that will not allow artificial intelligence and platforms to further amplify the polarization and radicalization, because I think that without it, that's a vicious circle and it will be worse and worse. About women, so Konfederacja, they have always been paradoxical, and I would say that first, often they're, for example, saying this what you mentioned, that they are anti-Semitic, anti-Jews, anti-abortion, anti-taxes, anti-EU. And then the guy who said it in 2019, Sławomir Mencen, one of two leaders of Konfederacja, said, I don't believe that anymore. So it's generally their communication policy. If you are asking, you said that, what about your beliefs? I don't remember saying that. I don't believe that. That's not my words. So that's the one thing. But the second thing is about their voters. They cater to two groups of voters. One is, of course, the far-right, populist, radical right voters. But the second one is just young people that are disillusioned with the traditional politics. And these ones are interested in what Konfederacja has to say as regards professionalization, libertarianism, no taxes, and non-interference of the state. So this, having women on the list, it's catering to the big city, well-educated young electorate.
I think that one topic that we'll definitely have to deal with in the past is media and the far right. It comes over and over again. Are there any more questions? Or shall I invite Ivan and Daniela to do a little summary of, of what was said today and how to solve it? Ivan, you please get up.
As we always say, it's impossible to summarize you want me to stand?
Stand up, yes. Please.
Okay. thank you all. As the cliche goes, it's impossible to summarize the wealth of the conversation that we had in both panels. I think the important thing that we did is that, as Mirjana repeats, that understanding the local context, the context of the countries, and then the issues that overlap between the countries, because certainly there are things that are common, and we had it in both panels. As Iveta Radičová said at the beginning, you know, there's the issue of rule of law, of a state that abides by law and democracy, but then there's the other dimension, the socio-economic dimension. We didn't mention the word neoliberalism today, but clearly it underpins much of what we said. But then also the sort of, if I can use the word, the social anthropology or the political anthropology of the situation that we live in, of uncertainty, of fear, of the fact that with the technological developments, we have people who have been told, you have titles in newspapers that say 50% of jobs will be replaced by machines and by the digital sphere. So people who are in those categories are asking themselves, will I have a job in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Those who don't have a job are asking themselves, will I ever get a job? And that's why we, among other things, have this situation of precarious work, the precariat, as we call it. And I think all this creates, again, the uncertainty that we see in all of these societies. And then, of course, the positive and then the fallouts of globalization that we euphemistically call those left behind, those who are uncatered for. On top of that, you have the migratory dynamics, and you have this paradoxical situation where, for example, Germany says we need 400,000 people a year, and you are against migration. So one has to square those two things. Italy, again, I think, Mirjana, we had this discussion with one of your invitees, I think an Italian political sociologist, who said, well, migration is really not an issue because we need so many people. And yet again, because of racism, because of various other things, these two things directly clash with each other. So the need of society and the economy of these societies to actually fulfill the requirement of constant growth, which leads us into a whole other big question, do we need so much growth? And the profit-driven enterprises. And then you put yourself in the shoes of she or him, the so-called normal, ordinary citizen, and they are buffeted by this. And of course, today with social media as well, where there are purveyors of fake news, of conspiracy theories, of flat earth, and the whole vaccine thing. So it's no surprise that people are confused, to put it very simply. And that is the space where we heard from all of our speakers very eloquently, understanding, we as citizens of our countries, wherever we are, understand this because we confront it. You know, I like to say that Vienna is probably the 3rd or 4th biggest Serbian city. There are 110,000 people living from Serbia here. In Austria, nearly 300,000 people from Serbia. And let's not mention Scandinavia and all these countries. So we have a mix of issues. Of course, these people don't have the right to vote, et cetera, et cetera. That's a whole other bag of issues. And I think that the fact that we are addressing this issue is because these parties are on the rise. And what will they do when they either enter a coalition or, God forbid, have a full majority? The evil of history in Europe, unfortunately, teaches us that these things can happen. We lived in the complacency that this would not happen. Unfortunately, my country disappeared, called Yugoslavia, because of these ethnical identity populist issues. Politicians vying for power and money and taking the tool of nationalism to to stay in power. We see what Russia did, again, a surprise for, I think, 99% of people. Didn't expect that there would be somebody crazy enough to decide as a nuclear power to invade a sovereign European country called Ukraine of 44 million people, but it happened. So this kind of earthquake, this kind of shattering moment, you know, in think tank terms of European security architecture, but more fundamentally in the lives of people who are not sure. And it's no surprise that people on the eastern flank of NATO and the European Union don't know what will happen. And that's why the need for Ukraine to win or for Russia not to win is so fundamental. And I think of Romania and Bulgaria, for example. You know, there were so many people against the entry of these two countries in 2007. They were not ready, there's corruption, there's, you know, no rule of law. Just imagine today, had that geopolitical decision to make Romania and Bulgaria part of the European and NATO not been done. It would have been an open highway for Russia to walk in had they, which they didn't, fortunately, conquer the whole territory of Ukraine. So I think we, you know, it's kind of back to the future or back to the past. There's just been two books the FT reviewed about 1923 in Germany. You know, what led to the Munich beer hall thing. What was it? You know, the eternal discussion was the decision made at Versailles. Were they correct? You know, did they lead? Did we put Germany down too much? Was there this France's taking over of the Saarland in 19... Lots of historical issues, and we're trying to learn, of course, what is the way forward. But concretely, the topic is the far-right policies and rhetoric, but it's really about democracy. It's really about the fact, how do we, because, you know, I think we share the values and the underpinnings of democracy, which are the rule of law, which are red lines that we cannot be tolerant to those who are intolerant. Yes, freedom of speech, absolutely. Academic freedom, the critical approach to society. There is no such thing as a perfect government, and it needs to be criticized. And I think what Alberto said about Meloni, I think we see that in my country as well. You know, the president, who is, in this case, elected directly, or other leaders in Europe take it upon themselves to decide on everything, the most minute detail in society. And that is the erosion of democracy. So I'll stop there. This is about trying to save democracy and how we go about it. There are many aspects, and I will only say political, social, and economic. And we cannot disregard the fact that people feel that they are not living as well, to put it very mildly, that people don't feel that their interests are being looked after, and that others, in their view, migrants, are having a better day than they themselves. And thus, I think the task of this project, again, thanks to the Erster Foundation, that we are here in our cooperation, we can, with a certain degree of insight, help those, first of us, ourselves, who are in this job, because it's not only the elected politicians, it is civil society, academia, and everyone else who has to stand up, be counted, and defend what we believe in. Thank you very much.
I should just, first of all, thank the second panel. I thank you all for listening online and offline. And just to continue in one sentence, if I'm able, what Ivan said, this is all about democracy. I see our contribution in providing information. I think information is the basis of everything. We cannot all do everything. We can provide information with the best speakers, and since our audience are mostly media and academia, they have the further role to spread not only the word, it doesn't sound too good, but at least they should be also at the forefront of defending democracy. I thank everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.